Well, hello, and welcome back to the Redeem Her Time podcast. I don't know about you guys, but a lot of us are not only juggling business, but we're also juggling other roles and responsibilities in life. And one of the top ones that many of us juggle is this role of mom. And so today we're going to have a conversation around how to build a life that reflects your God-given priorities in both home and business, which is going to involve saying no. That's not only just okay, it's also a good thing and something that's necessary if we want to do well at both life and business, especially as moms. So I brought in Aliese Halcomb as our guest today. Aliese, I am so excited that you are here. Introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a little bit about life outside of business first. Like what's filling your time these days? What are you juggling? And then we'll dive into how you're helping us to build a life and business aligned with our priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. At this season of life, I am running a business. I have a toddler. He'll be 3 in just a little bit, so that's crazy. I didn't know how fast that happens. Everybody keeps telling you, go so fast, but it does.
It does.
And then like all the normal things that Christian moms have, right? I've got family, I've got a husband, I've got friends. There's Bible studies. There's all this stuff that's going on around me, and it's beautiful and wonderful, and it can be a lot. But it's all great, and I'm grateful for this season of life that I am in right now.
I
Hmm.
love it. And like you said, like each season has its own blessings. I can remember the 3-year-old phases and I was not building a business at that stage. So I give you a lot of credit for being able to do both and do both well. And, each season, like you said, has its own blessings and challenges. And yet God is faithful, through it all. So tell us a little bit then about what you are doing in your business, how you are serving women in business who are also trying to do this thing and be a mom at the same time. And take us a little bit maybe on that journey of how God brought you to that place. Because I'm sure a lot of us learn from doing it the hard way or the wrong way or the loop-de-loop way, right?
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So before I had my son, I had him a little later in life. I was running a business. I'm a graphic designer by trade, so I did a lot of freelance work in that way, and it was great. I loved it. Then I got pregnant. Well, then the Lord brought me to a soup kitchen, which is a whole nother story, but we won't go into that. And so I worked there for a while, but then I got pregnant, and my husband and I had decided that I was gonna stay home. That was the plan. So I left and came home. And now I have this tiny person to take care of, and I'm trying to run a business because it's in my blood. If you run businesses and you're entrepreneurial, like you can't just not try to make something, right? And so that's where I was. And I was part of a business coaching group before, and she had opened up an agency. And I was like, that's me. I don't want to find clients. Give me clients, right? So I was able to make money while my son napped. Like that was the only time I worked while he napped. I was only working like, I don't know, 5 or 10 hours a week. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And then I was like, I can do this on my own. And then I jumped ship and I did it on my own. And then as I was learning how to do this, I realized that it's not intuitive for everyone to figure out how to do both. Because I would have these friends with I would have conversations with my friends and just like, they're trying to do something similar. And I was like, I have systems and rhythms. And so I started taking those and putting them down on paper and started showing other women like this is possible, but it's not possible to do everything you've ever thought of, but it is possible to do the things that are the most important to you. So at this season of my life, I'm basically doing coaching. I've partnered with a business coach, and so together we do business coaching and I don't like calling it life coaching, but it basically helps you figure out where to build that business at in the season that you're in.
I love it. What a beautiful story. And it's so interesting how, like you said, like it's not always intuitive, as to how to do something. I think sometimes we jump into business because we've got a great idea, like you said, and then we don't always realize all the other elements of it and what that's going to take. And so figuring out what those systems look like, what those rhythms look like, how to make this, keep this, the baby alive and the business alive is like, kind of
Hmm.
how I think about, those two things. And it does take time and attention. And we still have the same 24 hours in a day,
Yeah.
right? Now, here's
Hmm.
what I often go back to. My kids are now almost all out of the house, so I'm on that end of the parenting, different season of parenting. But I think back to those days before, we had that first baby, and likely you were busy, right? And you probably had a lot of things that were filling your time, and you weren't just sitting around twiddling your thumbs thinking, hey, I should bring this little dependent, child into my life that's going to suck all the life and time out of me. And yet, when that bundle gets put in your arms, right, you find time, right? And you make time because, like you said, like this little one matters. And so the same has to be true of our business, right? If this business matters to us, then we have to make time for it. And that's how it's going to be able to grow. So let's talk about the struggle, though, that maybe a lot of women do, feel who aren't quite, maybe as intuitive about that as you were when you jumped right in. Like, what are some of the challenges, as you've looked around and talked to other people, as you're coaching people, like, what are some of the things that women are coming up against as they're trying to do both life and business?
Yeah, so I would say there's definitely external things and internal things, right? So we're, bombarded with social media and all of these things that say, like, we're getting all these highlights, right? So we're hustling, we're doing it all. You need to be perfect, run your business, post 4 times a day, be on all the platforms, start a blog, start a podcast, sell this. And then while you're at it, make sure you're also homeschooling your kids, baking all the treats, doing all the stuff, going to the big birthday parties, throwing the big birthday parties. And so there's so much that's going on in other people's lives that we get to see it. We're not made to see everybody's everything. And so we feel like if we're not doing exactly the same thing, then we're not doing enough. And that's just not true. And some of that guilt comes from within and some of that guilt comes from others. And if you have people like that, then they're probably not your friend's friend. And so I would just say that we're just bombarded all of the time. And none of the things are necessarily bad on their own.
Hmm.
But if you try to do them all, they will rob you of the peace that God promised you. You will never sit still. You'll never have any quality time with the people that are important to you, the business that you say is important to you. And so if you allow your guilt from the inside or from the outside to live there and take you over, then it becomes a big problem.
Yeah, it is, and I love that you pointed on the fact that it is external, but a lot of it is internal. It's this feeling of I should be able to do this laundry list of things in this area of my life and this laundry list of things in this area of my life. And then we feel, really bad about ourselves. And,
Mhm.
I find a lot of us, myself back in the day too, like really had this like this like tug of war with guilt, right? When you're with your family, you feel like guilty because you could be or should be working on your business. And when you're working on your business, you feel guilty because you could and should be with your family. And so this is, kind of maybe the struggle that we're seeing. And so as we're looking at, the highlight reels, as I like to say, and seeing how easy everyone else makes it look. Yeah, what does that like what's the advice that maybe we're hearing or maybe we're just seeing it from the world out there telling us how to be this mom who also has a successful business? What's maybe what are the things that we're hearing or seeing and thinking that this is the way?
I think that they're just saying like you can do it all. You can do everything.
Mm.
And those are just lies. Like maybe you can do everything, but you can't do it all at the same time.
Hmm.
And that the person that you're seeing on Instagram who's doing all the things, like maybe she's real nice and maybe she has a team of like 10 people that are helping her.
Right, that's what I was going to say.
Um,
You have no
and
idea how many people are helping to make that thing happen, right?
exactly. And even the people who aren't trying, like there are people on the internet that they are not doing it for good intentions, right? They want you to be struggling, basically. And so they're making your life difficult by telling you that their life is perfect and that yours should be too. But there are plenty of people who are just trying to give you good advice, and you are watching 10 different people, and they're not all living the same life, but now you think you need to live the lives of 10 people. They're not doing that. So you don't need to do that either.
Yeah, so important, right? Just because somebody sees somebody else or we think we see somebody else doesn't mean that this is what you have to be doing. And do
Yep.
you find then, like, as you're working with women or as you're having these conversations, like, are they sticking with it long term or are they bailing on their business because it's just that struggle becomes too much? Like, what is this costing us, I guess, not just in our business, but also thinking about, what's it costing us with our time? What's it costing us, even in those roles with those things that, like you said, we say are important, but then aren't really getting our time and attention.
I've seen it mostly like a cycle, right? So we feel really guilty. And so we're going to fix everything and we're going to fix it right now. And so we make lists of all the stuff that needs to be done in our business and in our home. And we're going to start running 3 miles a day and we're going to stop watching TV and no one's getting a screen in this house. And, I'm going to bake everything from scratch and I'm going to start that business I've been thinking about. And so instead of taking it, at the steps that are actually sustainable, we just jump full force and all in and like in the deep end and we can't swim, and then you do it for like a day, 2 days,
Right.
a week. You're like, this is not a thing I can do. And then you fall and you feel bad that you didn't do any of it, but nobody could do that. No one could do that. So it's
Yeah.
okay that you didn't do it. And then you feel bad for a while and you're like, I'm not going to do anything. And then you try again.
Mm.
But instead of changing your tactic, you try exactly the same thing.
Isn't it interesting? It's a definition of insanity is that you
Yeah.
keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result.
Hmm.
And yet I think we do. We think that we're superwoman and we can take on everything and change everything. And, that isn't how things often work, especially want to be sustainable. So not where we want to stay. But you've mentioned and talked about setting up rhythms, and I'm all about rhythms and, and like how we can create these systems in our life and in our business that are going to be sustainable, that are going to make sure that we are not, stop start cycle, that we're not, shaming ourselves. Yes, there may be some days where, we just aren't feeling it or for whatever reason aren't able to do what it is that we wanted to do, but we have a system or a rhythm to go back to. So what would be some of the first steps for a business owner who wants to set up her own rhythms? Like, help us kind of get practical around, okay, I do want to do this and I don't want to be on that cycle that you just
Yeah.
described.
Yeah, so I really would say the first step is to take a step back, right? And so you need to evaluate where you are and where you want to be, right? So if you're going, like you put an address in your GPS, like your GPS tells you where to turn. And so if you don't know where you're headed, then how will you know how to get there? So what is important to you? What are you saying? Because it's easy for us, most people can tell you what they think is most important to them. And I say it like that because just because you say something does not mean that's how you're acting. And
Yeah.
so if you're here, you're probably my goodness, probably your priorities are God, family, and your business in that order. And so I would say look at what you're actually doing. I would literally write a list about what you're doing through your week. That's what we do. I do with my clients. So like write down everything you're doing each day. And so as the week goes on, it's easier because you're doing a lot of the same things throughout the week.
Sure.
But write that list and take a very hard look at it. Not about what you want it to look like, what it is. And you can decide like, are these things serving my family, my relationship with God, my business in this season? And there's probably a lot of good stuff on there that isn't for now,
Mm.
right? Like it doesn't mean it's bad because you say no to it. It just means that you are not the one for it. And that's all right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I love that permission, right? And I talk about the 4 Ds decision matrix. The first D is just delete. It does not need to be done. Cross that off, feel good about it, get rid of any shame or guilt that you're not doing it just because you think you should be. The second one is delegate. Like, what are the things that do need to be done, but you're not the only person on the planet that can do it? And then that third one is delay. And that's kind of what I was hearing you talk about there. Like, it's not a bad thing, and it may be a later thing. It's just not a not now thing. But it still needs to be cleared off of that. Okay, so once we take this step back, kind of evaluate where we are, what our priorities are, what we're doing, what would we do next?
So I would, you have this list and you're taking inventory of it and you're deleting things like you're talking about. This is not for me. This is or delay, I guess. Not for me, not for now, or not for me ever.
Right.
And who can you give it to? That's definitely where we go. And then I would take that list. Now you know what's most important to you. You have a week. I would look at a calendar and I would say, like, where do those things fit? You
Mm.
want to work out? What's a realistic amount of time or like days you can do such that thing? When can it fit? When can you put it on the calendar? And who do you have to tell that you can work it out with? If you're married, your husband needs to know. And you guys need to have a conversation. Conversate. Don't make decisions by yourself if you're married. And so, just add those things to your calendar. So every week you're not trying to figure out when to go to the gym. On Tuesdays and Thursdays in the evening at this time, I show up. You're not using all that brain power to figure it out every week. So make your life easy and put things on a schedule so you don't have to waste your brain energy to make that
Right.
decision.
I loved your reminder earlier that like a lot of the things we do are on repeat. So whether you're doing it multiple times a week or it's like each week this thing comes around,
Hmm.
why are we reinventing the wheel looking at a blank piece of paper when we sit down to do our weekly planning? One of the
Yeah.
things that I teach and have a new program that just came out, the ideal week, where like you take those priorities and say, okay, I'm going to create this template. Now there may be weeks where that doesn't happen for whatever reason, and that's okay, but even if it doesn't happen at the time you would like it to normally, you can switch it around somewhere because it's still
Hmm.
part of something you're making time for. So, okay, so we've got our list, we've got our week, and what is there a next step after that?
It's try it out, right? So if you've ever made a budget, you know that the first one that you've made stinks, right? Like you have to tweak it, you
Right.
got to figure it out. You didn't know what you were actually spending time on. So your first like rhythm schedule that you created for your week may not be perfect. It probably won't be perfect. And going
Mhm.
in knowing that it'll set the expectation of like it's okay to change this if it's not working for me right now. And especially if you have young kids, and I guess if you have older kids, I don't know, I only got 3 year old, they change really fast. And so like it will work for a couple months, especially when they're real little. Like it'll work for 3 months and then you gotta do it again.
Yeah.
And it'll work for a year and then you gotta do it again. Or never a year. It's never worked for a year. But you,
Right.
you
I was
know
going
what
to
I'm
say,
saying, right? Like
if you can figure out how to keep it consistent for an entire year, no matter what stage of parenthood you're in, you're mindful.
right?
Yeah.
And so like it's a tool that you can go back to,
Mhm.
right? When you're like you've done it for a while, things have been working, and then all of a sudden things are kind of in chaos, and you're like, this isn't working the way that it was. You just go back to the beginning. You see if things have crept in because they do
They do.
that are not good for you right now. You get rid of them, you tell someone sorry that you said yes to something that you shouldn't have, and you do it again. And so it's just this cycle of and you get better at it. Just like
Mhm.
budgeting. If you've ever budgeted, you get better at it. And
Yes. Yeah.
so you just continue to do it. And you continue to do it because it frees up your mind, it gives you peace, and everyone around you has kind of understands what's going on. Like your family will have more peace because they know what's next,
Yeah.
especially if you have children that are older and like they can see the schedule, they can see what's going on, they know where mom's going to be, and you're talking with your spouse and you both can be on the same page about what is important for your family.
Yes, I love this. So people know what to expect. And like you said, when you can not only know yourself, but also then communicate with your family, then there aren't as many of the like conflict moments where they're barging in your office or,
Yeah.
things are just kind of like erupting because
Hmm.
nobody's really, communicating with anyone else. And I love the fact that you're telling us to come back to it, right? I call it testing, tweaking, and troubleshooting.
Oh,
And I recommend once a season, so in the Redeem Her Time Planner, I actually like have you like do it again. And a lot of times it's not going to change, like it's not going to be earth shattering probably unless you had a really big transition. So that would be
yeah.
the other time to go back and revisit this is you've had a big transition. So for example, like when your kids start going to school, you'll see like school time year, feels different than summer, right? Or
Yeah.
maybe you have a move or a job change or a new level in your business that's requiring something else. So kind of whenever you have a transition, or at least like you said, once every 3 months or so, check in, what's working, what's not working, and all of that. So yeah, I love that. This is going to be an ongoing process, I think, until Jesus calls us home.
Yeah.
Because,
Absolutely.
yeah, we're always trying to, yeah, make sure that we're giving our time to what matters most.
Mhm.
So I love that. So what advice would you give to moms who feel like they are constantly falling behind in either home life or business? Because let's be honest, it's easy to feel behind in one or both of those a lot of the time.
I would say to give yourself some grace. Like, there will be seasons when things are crazy and it just feels like you're falling behind. And maybe you're not even doing anything wrong. It's just because you're in a busy season. Life happens, and that's okay. You can get back on the wagon when things calm down. Like a death in the family, a move, a job change, like those seasons are crazy. But if you're in a regular season of life and you feel like you're falling behind, I would bet you've probably let things into your life that you should not. You've said yes to too many things. You're filling up your calendar with stuff that's not actually aligning with your priorities, the things that you say that are the most important. And so I would go back and take a step back and see where you are and if you're just giving your priorities lip service or if you're really living them out.
Yeah, I love that. So, how do we say no? That can be really
Yeah.
hard, and especially like I think as women and as believers, like we just want to make everybody happy and we want our clients to be happy, we want our kids to be happy, we want our spouse to be happy, we want our home to be, like that is a challenging thing. So like how do we say no when we need to, how do we know when we just need to say no?
Yeah.
And how do we actually do that?
Actually do. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely hard. And it is a skill that doesn't go, like, it doesn't just become all of a sudden easy, but it gets easier as you
Ah,
continue to do it. And the people in your life, as you do it, know more and more that you are going to say no to things and you'll say yes to things. But so they'll know that. So just remember that, and then, down the line, once you've been doing it a while, people around you will know and understand and be less irritated at you. But it is uncomfortable. And so the way to know if you need to say yes or no to something is we use our priorities as a filter. So we know that God and our family and our business are important. Now, those things look different for everyone, like what that means for you and your family. And so you have to decide those things, right? God is most important, right? So what does that look like? Are you serving in a certain time? Are you doing, this ministry or that ministry? But if you just had a new baby, you're probably not opening doors for people on Sunday morning, and that's okay. And so you're looking at your life right now and whatever's being asked of you or you think is, get an idea because we all got lots of ideas. You can say, is this going to serve my priorities now? And so taking a second, don't just knee
mhm.
jerk say yes to stuff. I mean,
Yeah,
unless the Holy Spirit tells you to say yes, then you just do that thing. But if he's not, then take a second. Tell that person, let me think about it. Like, you don't have, it is not it's not their right to get an answer from you right now. May they want
yes,
an answer from you right now, but you don't have to. And
yeah,
that's uncomfortable. And so you have to be willing to lean into that uncomfortableness and be like, I'll let you know. I'll let
yeah.
you know. Maybe. And if the people around you who are not willing to let you have boundaries do not have boundaries and they're not gonna be great for you.
Mm,
Maybe, they'll grow and be better. I'm not telling you to get rid of them. I'm just saying, like, you don't have to feel bad that they're upset.
yeah.
Maybe you do feel bad, but you don't have to because you're allowed to be, your only responsibility is you and your little people, and you and your husband decide things together,
Yeah.
right? So saying no is difficult, but it will free you in a way you do not know when you are only responsible for what God called you to be responsible for and not everyone else's stuff.
And here's the reminder. When you don't say no to that thing that doesn't align with your priorities, you essentially are saying no to those things that you just said mattered, right? And so it's like you
Yeah,
are saying no either way. And so often, yeah, we're not looking at the cost of, saying yes to something or not saying no to something, and what that does to our priorities and all of that. But I
absolutely.
did hear you say earlier, and I would love just to hear a little bit on this. I heard you say earlier, it's okay to go to someone you've already given a yes to and like undo that yes, right? Like,
Yeah, it is. I wouldn't say, like, Jesus tells us our yes be yes, our no be
sure.
no. And like that's important. And if you feel like you need to live out like whatever it is, like this little season of life to finish it, like that's one thing. And I hate to tell somebody yes and then tell them no. But if it is drowning you or like, really bad for you, it's okay. Like go to them, tell them that you're sorry, you jumped the gun, take the ownership because it is your fault. You said yes. Now you can either say, sorry, I can't do this thing. Sorry, and then just like back on up. Or you can say, sorry, let me help you find someone else if you're willing to do that. But yeah, your time is your time. They don't get to decide what you do with it.
Yeah, yeah. Which leads me to the question I always like to pull this back to is how does creating these rhythms and knowing how and when to say no, how does this affect our time and our RODI, our return on time invested? Not only in our business, right, but also, as we talked about today, in our relationships and the other priorities that God's called us to.
Yeah, absolutely. So it helps your time and your roadie, which I really like, by the way, by where your time is going. Because if you don't know where it's going, then it'll just disappear.
You'll wonder where it
And you'll have
went.
no idea what you did all day. And by it'll free your mind and free up your time because you are not always thinking about the thing that you've forgotten.
Mm,
You are when you're in your office or doing your business or whatever, you're doing it at the time that you decided, right? So you're not worried about your children because they know what you're doing. And they also know that you have a time for them. It's not that this is all I ever do or they're all I ever do. It's that you've already established the times that you have. So now you are giving quality time with both. And so you
Mm.
can, when you're actually paying attention to the thing that you're doing, you will move so much faster because your brain is there, your
You're
mind
fully
is
present.
there.
Yeah.
Yes, you're actively present, you're thinking about that thing, and you're not worried about everything else. So, saying no to things that would creep in on either one of those priorities, your family or your business, gives you the ability to stay focused on the thing that God has called you to right now.
Girl, you're like preaching my here. I love this. And this, yet this is still something that I have to continually go back to and be
Hmm.
reminded of is
Yes.
it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality. It's
Yeah.
about, and being present is one of the words that keeps coming up with my listeners is just yeah, when our bodies are in a million places or our brains are, we are
Hmm.
not really fully doing anything well. And then it feels like everything is behind and being dropped and things like that. And so when we know what it's time for, which is what I heard you saying, like when am I working, when am I not working and I'm with my family or doing these other things, then we don't have that guilt that I should be doing something else at this time. And so I love how that frees that up. So what would you say to that one woman who's listening today who maybe is struggling right now to build her life and business in alignment with her priorities?
I would tell her to get comfortable being uncomfortable and saying no to things that are not for right now. That
Yeah.
would be the skill I think that most of us need to learn and continue to learn, myself included.
Yeah, yeah, right. Because it is gonna it feels uncomfortable, um,
Mhm.
when we're in it, but it will be better if we can, learn how to say no and how to discern moving forward what's a yes and what's a no. So that it's like choose your level of discomfort, right? Like you can feel
Yeah.
a little uncomfortable or you can have discomfort and, frustration going on for a long time. So yeah,
Yeah.
so many good things because this is a real life, like this is day to day of
Mhm.
each one of us who is called to business and also called to these other roles in life is like, how do we do it all well and still have the same 24 hours? So I'm so glad that you shared with us today. What would be a good next step for someone who wants to get support around, how to get some rhythms in place and make sure we're evaluating what we're giving our time to?
Yeah, absolutely. So I created a PDF guide that basically takes you through setting your priorities, inventorying your week, just like we were talking about, and then literally creating a weekly rhythm. And so it just is creating healthy, sustainable weekly rhythms. And so there is a guide, and I will get you the link to that.
Yeah, we will make sure to drop that in the show notes so you guys can go click on that and go through that process. There's something about pen to paper, like I think we think in our head, I've got this, or even we maybe are scrolling on our phone and we can kind of see some things on our calendar, but there is something about like getting on paper, writing it down, actually seeing where our time is going, and then being
Mhm.
able to ask those questions as we can look at it. So I definitely recommend you guys grab that. And we are going to continue the conversation over inside the community. So I always love to say this is just the beginning. This is not fixed, in the few
Yeah.
months that we're together. And there is so much more that we could dig into. And so we will have some opportunities for you to get to ask questions and, maybe share about, what this is like for you right now as you are juggling multiple roles. And Elise has been invited to be in with us as well. So a great opportunity to get to connect and learn more about her. So if you guys are not yet members of the community, head on over to redeemhertime.com/community. Come join a group of committed, called Christian women in business. Most of us are moms or have other roles that we play in addition to being CEOs of our business. And we want to be intentional with our time, right? Because like you said, we have been called to these specific things and they do matter. And so we don't just want to say it like you alluded to. We want to actually live it out. And we're doing that together. So coming over and join us where we're doing all that together and get to meet amazing people like Elise, who are also faithfully stewarding their time in life and business. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience with us today. I know that a lot of women are going to be blessed by this conversation. As we close up, it's summer right now. And so summertime can sometimes feel different. And sometimes there's a little different level of how we approach, life and business and things like that. But the main question I always like to ask is, what is it time for? So as you look at this season ahead, as summer and you think about, what's in front of you, like what is it time for? And why does roadie in that area matter to you?
Well, I went on this retreat with my mastermind not that long ago, and the Lord gave me two things. He said, stay still and keep going. Basically, he told me, stop
Funny
trying
how
to
they're
do
like, they
everything.
sound like
I
they're
know.
like
They're so different,
contradicting
right?
each
They sound
other.
but stop trying to do everything because I have a bad habit of that. That's why I have to teach this because I have to learn it all the
Right.
time,
That's
right?
how we learn. We teach ourselves, right?
Yes. And so he told me to stop and like calm down and just, and then keep going, doing the things that he told me to do last. And so just staying focused on exactly what the last instructions were, right? So here I
Right.
am, and that is what I'm doing. And by doing those things, if the Lord tells you to do something, it's a good return on investment, right?
Right.
So,
Girl, you know it, right?
yeah,
Better that than trying to fight against him or ignore him and end up coming back to him anyway and saying, "You're right.
right?
You're right." Yeah.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. Well, I love your intention around your business and around your role as mom. And so thank you for inspiring and encouraging us today. And I encourage you as a listener, I guarantee you know another business owner who also is, juggling multiple roles. Share this episode with her because I think this is how we grow. We don't just do this on our own. We're not just over in our own island, struggling over here by ourselves, but we come together and we say, hey, this is something I want to be intentional about. Let's do this together. So share this out with somebody, invite her to come into the community with you, and yeah, let's invest our time well and see what God wants to do in both areas of our life. So, all right, well, thank you so much, Aliese, for being here. I really appreciate you, and we'll see you inside the community.
Okay, thanks.